All right, we are live. To all my viewers and listeners, thanks for tuning in. My name is Brendan, Bodies by Brendan. I am a health expert. I like to use the word gut expert, but in this particular instance, I'm going to use the expert for my guest, Dr. Bob, because he absolutely dwarfs me in comparison to gut health and knowledge and functional medicine. So, as you know, I'm an author, speaker, educator, and sometimes I like to interview people and sometimes I like to get interviewed. But today I have an amazing guest, Dr. Bob Rakowski, world traveler, the doctor's doctor, Dr. Bob Rakowski, and a mentor of mine. So I'm really excited and happy to have you. Thanks for joining in.
You know what? Thank you. And I might take issue with what you said because, one of my mentors taught me a long, long time ago, if you master the basics, you seldom need anything else. And you've certainly mastered beyond the basics, but what you do so well is get people to take action. So I want to give you huge accolades on that, because if we just give people the right nudge, the body's going to take care of the rest. So well done. I love what I see in how you make our world better.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Well, hey, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. And, as my mentor, who you mentored, I've been taking some attributes from him. So certainly there's some qualities that are from you as well that I'm trying to emulate. So thank you. Which brings me to maybe my first question, mentorship. Mm-hmm. We all need mentors, and mentors are very powerful, and they can be in all sorts of different facets and ways, whether it's distance or local, in person or not in person, from a book or from a movie. There's so many different ways. You have been a mentor to many. Can you give me an idea of how many people you've mentored, and maybe on a distant level, but more so on a professional and more, concrete level, certainly that are more tangible?
Well, I don't even know how to quantify that, but let's just say on some level, it's been tens of thousands to professionals, because I've taught over 10,000 hours of seminars to doctors, and they grab the information and they see the success, and they also see failures in certain models, and they realize that we have a solution, that whether we're talking about the most elite athletes in the history of the planet or people that are fighting for their lives, getting the body healthier is always a good strategy. And we have absolutely solid plans to do that. So, up close and personal, I don't know how many people you can mentor. I certainly have a good dozen people that I keep really close contact with. And, we talk regularly and work through things that it's always a win-win. When they ask me a question, they get me to think deeper. They share a different perspective. And, I don't know how many one person can possibly mentor at a time. That might be a good question to ask Dr. John G. Martini, right? Because he's certainly been playing the game for a long, long time at a high level. But let's just go with, on some level, at least tens of thousands in terms of professionals.
Mm-hmm. So that brings a good point in terms of, relationships and both being mutually beneficial. So when you are mentoring someone, you kind of touched on it. What's the benefit for you, and what's the end benefit for them? But what are some of the benefits that you can't necessarily, hold in your hands, that are tangible? What are some of the beneficial factors that you can't really measure?
Well, I think those are most of them, actually. So one of my great mentors, Zig Ziglar, passed a number of years ago. If you haven't listened to his old school wisdom, you're going to want to do that, your listeners as well. But bottom line is, Ziglar's law is this: you can have everything in life that you want if you just help enough other people get what they want. And when I first met Zig in 1992 and I listened to that really struck home with me. And I thought, okay, here's the secret to life. Tony Robbins says the same thing. The secret to living is giving. So when we start exchanging and moving people in a better direction, when you add value to someone, especially someone who can multiply it, it comes back. It's just a universal law. It's coming back in ways that you may never imagine. So I'll even go back to my childhood. I had a very modest upbringing. My parents are awesome. They're happily married now. This is going to be 60 years. But I never saw a person in need where they didn't go out of their way to help them. So I grew up in Wisconsin. One of our favorite things was to push people out of the snow, or just go and shovel a senior citizen's walkway or driveway. And I remember, one time helping my dad with a project, and he said, son, I promise you, if you always go the extra mile for people, life and people will go the extra mile for you. And I promise you, that's the path I've been on. And it's been the most fruitful advice ever. Just be of service. You'll always have someone to serve, and it's always coming back.
Wow,
The law of
that's
sowing and reaping is another statement, right?
very powerful. So it seems as though that it's not like you develop these traits later on in your profession. You've had these lifelong.
They have served me since I can remember.
Okay, very good. So that's very powerful. And I am going to do some more research. And I keep on hearing Zig Ziglar's name many, many times. And I guess sometimes when someone brings up a name, an author or a speaker, you hear about them, but maybe you're just not ready to absorb whatever it is, whatever content that they are teaching. And I think the time now is I am ready to absorb and be introduced to Zig Ziglar. So thank you for that.
Well, you have such a good sense of who you are and where you're going. And if his message resonates with you, you'll pick it up immediately. And if it doesn't, then it's not the right time.
Right, right. Okay. Why don't we go back to social media and kind of who you are? Because you'd mentioned that you've been teaching thousands and tens of thousands of professionals around the world, and you have. But me being kind of younger and some of my other audience being younger, they may not necessarily know who you are. So who are you, and how can some people be introduced to you other than, from facets like this? Because this is such an amazing tool with, Zoom calls and YouTube and all that and social media. But, how did you get to be teaching in front of all of these thousands of individuals? How did it happen? So, how did it happen, and who is Bob in regards to, the presence that people may not know who you are?
Well, let's start with what I would consider a semi-failure, even though there are no failures. So, again, I grew up modest. None of my family had ever pursued higher education, even though my grandfather, a 6th grade graduate, formal education ended there, was one of the most brilliant men I'd ever met. His library, who knows, 8,000 square foot library, floor to ceiling with books that he had read in his 80 years.
Wow.
And he instilled a passion for learning early on. I was always amazed at how brilliant my grandfather was. So my parents said what a lot of parents said in their generation: go to school, study hard, get good grades, get a good job. So I went to school, and I have to say school was easy. Some brains are built towards whatever academia is. Mine certainly was. So I had a scholarship to go to the most expensive private engineering college in the state of Wisconsin. And 75% flunk out because it's a very tough program. And for the first time in my life, I had to study. But I graduated second in my class, and without, let's say, a ton of effort, but I never felt competent in the field. And I knew I was academically smart, but I didn't have the passion for engineering to become an excellent engineer. Case in point, my best friend from engineering school, I was the best man at his wedding, his mine. He owns a $150 million a year robotics company that he started from scratch. Here's a guy that had the passion for what he was doing. So when I decided to leave engineering, I called my chiropractor, who changed my life by being a great doctor and a great human. But at any rate, I said, Dr. Mike, I want to be good. What do I need to do? And his advice was brilliant and timeless. Learn from people who are successful. And then he qualified that. He said, Bob, you're going to go to a very good school, but most people teaching at the school have not been successful in clinical practice. If they were, they'd be in clinical practice making 4, 5, 10x what they are teaching. He says, so seek people who are succeeding. And so I spent tons of time visiting very successful doctors. And I would ask them, can you teach me your one thing, your one nugget, your one secret? What makes you different? And by the time you get 100 or so of those, you're on a pretty good path. So by the time I got into the student clinic, we have a year to complete our credits. I completed everything in 6 weeks, faster than anybody had ever done it. And so students in the younger classes were coming up to me and said, how did you do that? And I tell them, I studied from great people. They said, well, you should teach a seminar. I said, if I did, would you come? And they said, sure. So I advertised a little seminar. I called it 5 Days to Clinical Excellence, $200 a head, right? Certainly not much by today's dollars, but we're talking 1992. And 60 people showed up and gave me $200 cash, just like that. Well, for me, a $12,000 payday back then was highly significant. But I started teaching these students and they started learning and applying. Next thing you know, a nutrition company comes up to me and says, we'd like to sponsor you. I said, how does that work, right? So they sponsored me. Well, then another nutrition company came up to me and said, well, we'll take you all over the world. This company is only US. We'll take you all over the world. And they did, which was so nice. So bottom line, it was learning from people who knew, applying a broad-based scheme, getting fast results. People want to be better yesterday. They'd rather not be in your office, my office, anybody's office. And so that was one of the tips. If you can help them fast, help them fast. Now, here's another clinical pearl that'll take it another way. Then we'll get back to who am I and how did I get here? So I started asking myself the first year in clinical practice, what is the one thing that I can do that would help this person the most? And one of my mentors helped to rephrase this question. And he asked it, he said, Bob, are you asking what is the least I can do to get the most? Wouldn't you rather ask what is the most you can do to get the most? And as soon as I started doing that, my results took up a whole new level. My profits went up a whole new level. My referrals went up a whole new level. Suddenly professional athletes are calling my offices and saying, how do I get in to see this guy? So that was pretty epic. So who am I? I'm a guy that grew up hungry with a good value system and a good work ethic and an appreciation for real success.
Wow, that's pretty wonderful. I love that story, just how things happened chronologically. And so you were just finishing your last year of schooling when you started to teach the first year, or like the younger students?
The first seminar that I taught, I literally had just graduated. Mm-hmm. So I was out of school, who knows, a couple of weeks. And then 60 people showed up, and then, next thing you know, I've got a sponsor, and next thing you know, I've got an international sponsor, and next thing I know, I have more speaking gigs than I can accept.
Incredible. Incredible. So yeah, that's amazing. So actually, which brings me perfectly to my next question. You've taught hundreds and thousands of doctors, and you've also taught, let's just say, the regular general public. What do you like better?
Well, I'm not going to go with who's in the audience, except that the hungry student who has passion for getting better. Mm-hmm. And I've seen that in the lay audience, and I've seen people that had no background in health say, oh my gosh, this is what I want to do. Right. And now they're top level practitioners. And I've also seen people with more initials than you can put on a business card that are going, ho hum, I know everything, and I don't want that person in my audience. They're likely there in some cases getting, credits, right? And so I'd rather have people show up that are genuinely interested. Now, with that said, I'll share a funny story with you, because this could and likely will happen to you. So I was lecturing in Boston, and I was in my 20s at the time, and I had a Harvard PhD who was 70 years old in the front row. And when I walked in, maybe they didn't even have pictures on the flyer, but they had my accolades. And, he looked at me and says, so today I'm going to be your intellectual offspring. And he looked at me with one of these looks. I said, as odd as that sounds, that's the goal. Let's see how it goes. And by the end, he shook my hand. He says, thank you. He says, I learned a lot today. And I said, thank you for your attention. The fact that you're in the first row, a 7-year-old Harvard PhD, tells me a lot.
Absolutely. That's wonderful. And I have no doubt that you absolutely wowed him with your knowledge. With regards to, I guess, maybe, speaking and teaching and educating, what's your passion? What's, you know, you're very talented in different ways, but what's that number one passion that really kind of lights you up on fire every day?
It's actionable changes that have a huge reward. So Stephen Covey used to, talk about little hinges that swing big doors. And he had this term called a trim tabber. You have a big ship, and on the rudder, there's these little things that actually start changing the direction of it. He says, sometimes it's these little things that can get the massive leverage going. And I've been talking to the TED group this year, and I should be on a TED stage in 2020 and probably beyond that too, because we've been having great conversations. But the bottom line is, when I talked to the TED people, they said, Bob, I think your secret sauce are little things that make a big difference. And so ultimately, what turns me on, what really lights my fire, is making a genuine connection with a person, having an understanding of where they want to go, and then ultimately giving them a little tweak or a little direction or a little introduction that gets them moving on a path to much better, whatever they're looking for: health, happiness, peace of mind, wealth, wisdom, whatever. The world is available to all of us at all times, and sometimes it's just that little nudge.
Right. So that's a good point, actually, which can take me into my next question. For those that don't know who you are, we're obviously getting a feeling for that you're a health professional, a wonderful clinician, and you've been teaching doctors. What do you normally teach, and what is your clinical experience, and with who are your I guess your patients that are athletes and patients that are sick? So do you just want to touch on that a little bit?
Sure. So, probably my top topic in terms of hours is going to be clinical nutrition.
Okay.
Of the 10,000 plus hours I've taught, probably 7,000 is clinical nutrition, a little over 3,000 kinesiology and structural balance. And so when you look at teaching that, there's so much misinformation and even fear around it now, especially in Canada. I'm pretty amazed that there's a solid base of naturopathic doctors, but they seem to be very apprehensive to give much over what I would consider a baseline dose of nutrition. So I'm going to give a quote from Linus Pauling. Now, Pauling is the only guy to have ever won 2 Nobel Prizes unshared. One of my top biochemical mentors, Dr. Jeff Bland, the father of functional medicine, was Linus Pauling's research director. And here's what Pauling said about vitamins, but you can apply it across the board to nutrition. He said, it's amazing at how little you need to get benefit, yet how much you can give without doing harm. So you talk about a drug, the therapeutic window, and they describe it, the therapeutic window. If I had some Tylenol in front of me, a bottle of Tylenol, well, one Tylenol, that's enough to make a difference in terms of pain control. But you take the whole bottle, you might not wake up tomorrow. So, that's a small margin of safety. Now, any nutraceutical that I have in my office, including herbs, you can take the entire container, no matter how big it is. And, if your body's detoxing, you may get a loose stool, you may get a headache, you may have things like that, but you're going to be fine tomorrow. It's pretty fascinating how safe this stuff is.
Right.
So when I'm doing anything with clinical nutrition, the first thing I like people to know is it's very, very safe. And so the things I'm going to do for you are things that I've done for my wife, for my kids, for my best friends, for the sickest people I know, and for the most elite athletes. And what you may appreciate is there was an article entitled "The Application of Sports Nutrition in Critical Care Medicine." And what they found out was that the same nutrients that can help a world-class athlete take their game up just a notch can get that person who's fighting for their life the next step towards wellness, and the next, and the next, and the next. The same factors are going to keep all of us healthy. And it's really that sick person that really needs to pay attention to how much they're getting. They absolutely need a therapeutic amount.
Mm-hmm. So I was looking for one of his books, Dr. Pauling's, because, you know, that's my jam. It's orthomolecular medicine. Now he's one of the doctors that essentially brought about vitamin C. Is that right?
Oh, you're talking Pauling. I thought you said pollen, like Michael Pollan. Yeah. Linus Pauling certainly was very well known for vitamin C.
Right.
And, you know, he was still in his mid-90s publishing scientific papers and doing really, really well, sound mind and body. But he made an observation, and I don't think he was the original one to make this observation. It might have been a guy named Albert St. George who won a Nobel Prize for the discovery of vitamin C. But at any rate, what they found out is that only 4 mammals don't make their own vitamin C. And so a 150-pound goat, which is going to use about the average size human in times of stress, would make anywhere from 15 to 18 grams, 15,000, 18,000 milligrams of vitamin C a day. Just a fun aside, I'm an avid reader, and there's an Arctic explorer named Ernest Shackleton. And one of my Harvard MBA patients said, Bob, you like leadership. You ought to read about Ernest Shackleton. So I got the book. These guys were, you know, on an ice float, shipwrecked in Antarctica for 18 months before they took a little whaling boat 800 miles across, you know, rough seas to hit a tiny little dot in the ocean. But they were living on penguin meat. And I was just asking, how did they not get scurvy? How did they not have these problems? Penguin meat is high in vitamin C.
Oh.
So pretty fascinating that wherever you are in the world, the indigenous animals are going to have what they need, including the mammal, to live. So there's a little takeaway. If you're ever on an Arctic float for 18 months, go ahead and get some penguin meat.
Who would have thought? That's great. So really, I'm going to make just an observation or just a note for the viewers and listeners. For those that don't know, and I've said it at some of my presentations and just referencing you, Dr. Bob is literally an A-list celebrity doctor in terms of being known around the world in the professional field. So if you have not heard of him, that doesn't mean that he's not incredibly affluential in the medical world. He's even been compared been compared against or better than Dr. Perlmutter, Dr. Bland, Dr. Hyman, and those are kind of more, I don't like to use the word mainstream, but I guess in social media, they're known a little bit more. And that's one of the goals, really, why I'm doing this seminar, is because I want people to know and learn about you and fall in love with Dr. Bob, because you said it earlier, you just love to speak and teach and make an influence. And so what a great opportunity to, share more of Dr. Bob with people that may not otherwise know you. But I just really need to emphasize that. Folks, Dr. Bob is literally one of the best in the world. So, I just needed to say that. You know what I mean?
Well, you know what, I appreciate that. And the people that you mentioned are world-class in every way. And part of their passion, and they're quite good at it, is getting their message out on the broad scale. So they did high accolades for that.
You've got just maybe some key nutritional supplements. I know that you really like some, a few of, like, let's say your top 5 supplements. Do you want to just maybe touch on that and explain and showcase why?
Sure. I'm gonna get a little story behind that. So I was lecturing in Orlando, Florida, with Barry Sears right after he released his book, The Zone. And so I don't know if Barry's window was before your window, but a great author, PhD researcher. And at the time, he put up a picture of the USDA food pyramid, which, by the way, had 9 to 11 servings of processed, genetically modified gluten carbohydrates at the base. And I love this comment. He said, if ever there is a terrorist-like plot to destroy the health of the world, this would be it. The food pyramid was politically derived and certainly not in the best interest of health. So I thought, let me create my own nutrition pyramid. And by the way, I created my own life pyramid as well, right? So it's not just nutrition. We need to eat right, drink right, think right, move right, sleep right, poop right, talk right every day. We're mental, physical, emotional, spiritual, social, financial, impactful beings. But when we go with the food pyramid, the base ought to be food. And I'll go to Jack LaLanne, who, by the way, Jack LaLanne's mentor was Paul Bragg, and Paul Bragg was John DeMartini's launch to success.
Right.
Which is so exciting, right?
Yeah.
But at any rate, here's what Jack LaLanne said. If God made it, it's okay. If man made it, don't touch it, right? Some people don't like the word God. Okay, if nature made it, it's okay. But if man made it, don't touch it. So I go from food at the base, which we're going to eat enough to calorically support ourselves. Then I go to superfoods. Now, superfoods are things that have all the fabulous 50, all the vitamins, minerals, amino acids, proteins, carbohydrates, fat, fiber, and water at a dose that makes significant difference to human health. But we don't take superfoods and eat them by the pounds over the course of the week. Even milligram or microgram doses of superfoods can make a difference. Then there's a whole new category of food, which Jeff Bland didn't originate, but he certainly got it on the map, and those are medical foods. So I like to tell people the 4 criteria for medical foods, and we'll try to be brief, but medical foods have guaranteed potency, guaranteed purity, proven effectiveness in human clinical trial, with every nutrient recognized as safe. And there are medical foods that have been set up to help detox or modulate inflammatory process or seal and heal the gut or modulate the immune system or help to clear hormones or heavy metals, etc. So those are things that I'm going to use as part of my clinical approach. Then I go with a multivitamin, multimineral. You don't want to miss anything. They're super safe. Why not get a nice bioavailable supplement there? Then I go with omega-3s, but not just omega-3s, but activated omega-3s. So I co-lectured at a conference where a Dr. Sirhan from Harvard, who had been nominated for a Nobel Prize, was sharing his research on activated omega-3s. So basically, once we consume an omega-3, healthy people create a further downstream molecule, what they called resolvins. And they ultimately named them resolvins because whatever the individual was dealing with, human or animal, it resolved faster. Infection resolved faster, injury resolved faster, cancer resolved faster, depression resolved faster, anxiety resolved faster. And so that's good science. So we give the activated omega-3s. Then we're going to finish with 2 more levels. We're going to do probiotics. There's more bugs in our gut than our cells in our body. And as I simply tell my patients, every living organism eats, drinks, and goes to the bathroom. The difference between good bugs and bad bugs is what they eat and what they poop. Good bugs eat poop nutrients. Bad bugs eat nutrients, poop toxins. So we want to maximize the good. And then finally, I used to have just vitamin D at the top, but we go a D3K2 combo because we know there's better synergy when those 2 are combined, and that'll finish the nutrition pyramid that I recommend. So all those things I recommend for everybody.
That's great. That's a very complex yet fundamentally not simple, but just easy to follow. Do you want to maybe give examples of superfoods? Because you touched on that earlier.
Sure. So I'll go, there's a lot of different superfoods out there. Honey is a superfood, acai is a superfood. Some people consider blueberry a superfood. My favorite is the herb reishi, also known as Ganoderma, also known as lychee. I've used it now for all 28 years of clinical practice. It's got a phenomenal safety margin. If you Google or PubMed all 3 names, Ganoderma, reishi, lychee, you'll find over 3,000 peer-reviewed studies. And at a very, very tiny dose, milligrams, not micrograms in this case, but you see profound changes in human health. So I certainly use capsules with it. And one of my favorite things to do is dose things every waking hour. And I'll tell a story. I had a woman come in, 73 years old, miserable. She had a bad case of the shingles. She felt like her arm was on fire. She was taking morphine and still not taking down the pain. And she said, Dr. Bob, this is making me sick. I can't get rid of the pain. I don't want to live like this. So I basically gave her a container of Ganoderma spores, the most concentrated part of the plant. And I said, look, take a loading dose of 4 and then take 1 every waking hour. Well, she came back the next day to buy another supply. And her name's Judy. I said, Judy, you ought to have enough to last you through the weekend. She said, no, I'm taking 4 every waking hour like you said, right? So here was the challenge with that. I'm usually pretty good about being clear and even writing it down. I just happened to walk up to my waiting area, see her grimacing in pain while I had patients, and I said, Judy, what's wrong? And she told me. So I just handed it to her, and that was that.
Right.
So I started chuckling. I said, well, Judy, you can start reducing that. She says, this is the first time I've been pain-free since this flare-up 3 weeks ago. She says, I don't want to reduce it. said, well, try 3 1 hour, then 2, then 1, then skip hours. Well, there's a study on Ganoderma araceae and shingles, and 100% of the patients responded in this PubMed study. And at 1 year, none of them had a relapse. Now, medically, if they give antivirals, they can get some reprieve, but 12.5% are going to have a relapse within 12 months. So pretty nice product, very safe, very effective.
Mm-hmm. That's pretty powerful. It's I was just speaking to a lady this morning, and she was concerned about her high blood pressure. So just because it's fresh on the top of my mind, how would you administer Ganoderma with someone who has high blood pressure?
Well, first and foremost, I'd let them know that it's actually studied for it. So
Okay.
one, it's called an ACE inhibitor, angiotensin converting enzyme. And I rather use the word modulator than inhibitor, even though the peer-reviewed literature says that it is. Secondly, it's going to improve insulin signaling. And when people have insulin resistance, insulin problems, insulin increases sodium reabsorption from the distal tubes of the kidneys, and that can elevate blood pressure. Third, it's really good for nitric oxide. So it's a nitrate donor. Nitrate in the body becomes nitrite, becomes nitric oxide. That's going to dilate blood vessels. Nobel Prize winning research to Farhad Merad and his team. By the way, I've also co-lectured with Farhad at a conference long ago, but I'll tell you what, that guy knows so much about nitric oxide. But a single dose of nitric oxide can dilate blood vessels as much as 62%. But we have to know that there's 3 different types of nitric oxide. There's endothelial, that which lines the blood vessels. There's neuronal, that which is in the brain. And then there's inflammatory. And in an acute inflammatory episode, the inflammatory nitric oxide can go up 1,000x. And quite simply what happens is that's not the form of nitric oxide that dilates the blood vessels, so the blood vessels can actually constrict. And in people that have compromised circulation, that could be the factor for heart attack and stroke. And in fact, in the medical literature, top risk factor for heart attack is inflammatory process. So when we donate nitrate, when we modulate the inflammatory process, when we decrease the insulin, when we modulate angiotensin converting enzyme, and by the way, Ganoderma is also known as the herb of spiritual potency and the herb of immortality. Basically, we put a drive in the central nervous system, which is very, very calming. It begins to drive the parasympathetic system, and then blood vessels naturally relax. So there's at least 5 proven mechanisms by which it can lower blood pressure.
At the top of your head, like that.
Well, there's more if you want to go on, but yeah, isn't that beautiful?
It is beautiful. I'm glad that I asked. Okay, so I don't want to take any more of your time, but let's talk about the event. And for someone maybe who is new to you or new to even personal development, I always use this reference. I was first introduced technically to the law of attraction in 2006 when I watched the movie The Secret, and everything's really has magnified since then. But maybe someone's on the fence, or maybe someone can't justify or is scared to take work off on the Friday. What are some reasons why you think they should come?
Oh boy, the first thing I like to say is that my thoughts don't necessarily match theirs, but as they start looking at what you're offering the people that you're interviewing and see if you see something that resonates with you. I tell people that one idea, just one, can be a game changer where you never, ever look back. And I see the promo in the background, and everybody you have on there is going to give way more than one of those ideas. Mm-hmm. So which one resonates? When people come, and it's easy enough for me to do this too with your audience, I offer 100% money back guarantee. If you're not 100% satisfied, you just let us know and we'll pay you back right then and there, because I absolutely know, 1, if you didn't get it while you're there, you were sleeping, but 2, let's have a conversation afterwards and let's see what's going on with you. And even a matter of minutes can be game changing. And that's the commitment of the people that you have there. Everyone is an expert. Everyone is a shining star. Everyone is heart-centered. And we're all there for the purpose. Let's make this world better, because we know it's coming back. Mm-hmm. So take the day off, knowing full in advance that it'll be more than worth the effort and time.
Yeah, and you know, I know the value, and so do you. And sometimes people say, you know, I can't afford the ticket, or I can't afford work. And I always say the same thing, like, what you'll be able to learn, you'll be able to apply the next day into work, and productivity should increase, and your mood should increase, and your health will increase. But you know, this is still relatively new to a lot of people. So that's another goal of mine and a vision, is just to share this with everyone, and share your vision as well. So it's really special. I'm glad that you were able to say that, because sometimes I don't say it so eloquently as others. So you said it very nicely.
Yeah, when we look at what's new, you've got living legend in your town, Bob Proctor. You know, and Bob Proctor says if we never did anything new, we'd still be laying in a crib looking at our toes. You know, let's face it, all growth comes in new territory. We've got to take that step. Safe environment, beautiful people, loving people. You know, the ticket price alone for a John D. Martini would be 10x what people are going to pay to sit in that audience. And they get John and his wisdom, which I suspect now is spanning 5 decades. I'm not quite sure how old John is, but at least 4. And you know, every time I see him, interact with him, I'm going to get on a plane to fly just to see John D. Martini. And as a bonus, I get to share and listen to all the other people you've got on there.
Just for a dollar figure, just for the sake of throwing it out there, how much have some of the most expensive tickets been to see you speak? Do you know?
Boy, you know, I don't run the pricing. I get paid a pretty penny to go. Well, let's just say that they're at least 4 figures to the left of the decimal point.
Right. Heck of a value.
There you go.
Okay.
But I paid 5 tickets to the left of the decimal point for one idea that is paid 7+ figures to the left of the decimal point. So,
right.
You know, I like to go with Red Adair, who's a deceased oil field firefighter, but you know, he was hired to put out the fires of Kuwait when there was that attack on Kuwait. And one of his famous quotes is, if you think hiring an expert is expensive, try hiring an amateur. And so the people that you have on that stage, profound expertise across so many topics. Mm-hmm. I'm excited for the day.
So am I. It's and selfishly, it's definitely a dream come true with so many of these speakers, including yourself. So it might be emotional, but it's definitely going to be some quick tears of joy, that's for sure. And then you can take the stage and just awe everyone with your passion and knowledge. So it's really wonderful. And I love that saying. It's more expensive to hire an amateur than it is to hire an expert, or it's going to cost you more.
Life is on the line, or you're losing $1 million a day burning oil, or $1 billion, or whatever else, right? But when we start talking about therapies or coaches or whatever, the most expensive program is the one that doesn't work.
Right.
And, you know, there's a lot of people that have this block with parting with their money. Well, trust me, if you think it's in short supply in your life, it will be. When you start creating abundance, sharing abundance, experiencing abundance, investing in yourself, which, by the way, Warren Buffett, most likely the best investor of all time, says the number 1 investment you'll ever make is in yourself. So make that investment.
Very good. I'm going to leave it on that note. What a high note. Dr. Bob, thank you so much for your time. I am really excited to share this in the cosmos of the internet and social media and all my platforms. And I am really looking forward to having you join us among all the other living legends here in Toronto on April 3rd. One more quick question. What's your next big vision, big game plan for you? What's happening for you?
You know, it's going to be the TED stage. Okay. And so I've had my eye on it for a while. And in fact, the TED organizers asked me, they said, why the heck haven't you had a TED talk? And I said, you know, I guess I just didn't put energy in that direction. But I love the idea of something that has the potential to get billions of views with those tiny little tweaks that can impact so powerfully.
So basically what you're saying is the audience in Toronto is technically going to have an opportunity to see a TED Talk speaker eventually.
Oh, write it in stone. Absolutely. It's
Very
happening.
good. Very good. Well, thank you so much for your time, Dr. Bob. I really enjoyed this call, and I will say farewell until next time, and I really look forward to seeing you on April the 3rd in Toronto.
Myself as well. Enjoy.
Thank you.